Dear students, let us start the discussion on today's newspaper. The first important article today is related to the freedom of press. So in this context, so let us try to understand what is the press freedom index is. So you have International Federation of Journalists, they provide for this index. In this, India is ranked very low, and the worsening condition in Bangladesh is another concern which has led to the low ranking of South Asia as a region. So here, let us try to understand why such a situation has come up. So the May 3rd is the World Press Freedom Day. On this, UNESCO has reiterated the freedom of information and freedom of speech and expression. These are critical towards the functioning of the press. So the Ethical Journalists Network, it has observed certain wrong trends which are growing in journalism, and they describe it as crisis of information. What it consists of? So there is a misguided journalism. So the propaganda and added to that hatred which is growing on, or hate speeches, etc. These are misconstructed as journalism, and they are being reported or given excessive publicity. And next is online misuse, especially the gender stereotypes, etc. are being built on, and the terrorist elements such as IAS are using the online media towards spreading of this online hatred. And government surveillance, and it's a worldwide phenomenon. And added to that, misuse of personal information by the various agencies in the form of big data. And finally, restricting the press freedoms or imposing the sanctions on the press freedoms and punishing the individuals, especially in the war-torn regions. These are the various things which are for the crisis of information the world is facing today. So in this case, what we have to do is the right to information and freedom of expression has to be safeguarded, and there are three things which are fundamental to the ethics to be practiced in the press. They are: one, humanity; the second is accuracy; third one is transparency. So these shall be the guiding principles towards improving the press freedom. And another article, it is related to the Bangladesh and recent attacks on the Bangladesh. These attacks on the liberals, bloggers, and transsexual rights activists in Bangladesh is indirectly connected with the war tribunal judgments. When Sheikh Hasina government has come up, it has appointed this war tribunals in relation to the popular demands that have come up in 2013, which are described as the Shahbag protests. So after this, now, the Jamaat-e-Islami, it is more indirectly or more directly related to these particular killings. But Jamaat-e-Islami is not claiming the responsibility for these. And most of the people who are hanged to death in these war tribunals, these are the activists of the Jamaat-e-Islami. So in this context, the Islamic State is claiming the responsibility for this. Al-Qaeda in South Asia is claiming the responsibility for this. It is going to provide the warning signs not just for Bangladesh but also for India, because an unstable Bangladesh is going to spill over its effect into India. So now, for the future of the Bangladesh, there is one stream of the people who want to see a progressive, democratic and secular Bangladesh. Other stream of the people, they want to have a conservative Bangladesh. So in this context, the governmental action and stress on protecting these liberals will give a greater strength to the progressive democratic Bangladesh and for its stable future. And coming to the Nepal issue. So with regard to the Nepal, let us try to understand the existing political scenario. So there are four major parties. The Nepali Congress is the largest party, followed by the Communist Party of Nepal, United Marxist-Leninist, which belongs to the Prime Minister K.P. Sharma Oli. And after that, the Communist Party of Nepal, Maoism, which is headed by Prachanda or Pushpa Kumar Dahal, and then is Madheshi Front. So, United Madheshi Front, these are the four political parties. So in this case, the present power is held by the Communist Party of Nepal, United Marxist-Leninist, and this is supported by Madhesis and Communist Party of Nepal, Maoists. In a recent readjustment or in a recent events, the Maoist Communist Party of Nepal head Prachanda has criticized the government with regard to the post-earthquake reconstruction in Nepal. And then the Nepal Congress is headed by Sher Bahadur Devba. So the Sher Bahadur Devba and Prachanda held the negotiations, and Madeshis are also willing to come out, and these three people together with Prachanda as the Prime Minister wanted to form the government. So in this context, in the last minute, the Prachanda saved his tone or saved his sides, changed its sides, and again adhered to or started continuing to give the support to the KP Oli government. So in this context, again the blame game has started, and the fingers are shown towards India. The Nepali president's visit to India is also postponed are cancelled, and also Nepali ambassador to India was recalled, who belongs to the Nepali Congress party. So in this context, the KP Oli and his government can be seen as a miserable failure in the case of the Nepal. So if you take the post-earthquake reconstruction in Nepal now, almost $6 billion plus are expected for reconstruction, and the global community has agreed to provide for $4.4 billion. But not even 1% of the money is being spent till date. It shows the inefficiency of the government. And the second thing is the relations with India are at their low. So in this context, the Madhesis, or else issue of Madhesis, and then the accusation of economic blockade on India, and playing the Chinese card against India and making a transit agreement, all these show the political immaturity. So historically Nepal played the Chinese card against India. So it has been a very from the initial days when the Nepal was consolidated, from these days onwards, from the Prithvi Narayan Shah days onwards, so the Nepal is playing this China card. So in this context, the country has to realize that it is not geographically feasible for the Nepal to depend upon the China for its imports. And the second thing is, China will never allow the open borders with the Nepal, which India has allowed for. On the other hand, how the India stand has to be. You know that the neighborhood policy, first policy, which when Modi envisioned, and when he made a visit to Nepal in 2014, and he has got a very warm welcome from the Nepalese. But slowly the situation got, changed. So in this context, India has to behave as like a country which is always interested in beneficial partnership, which is seeing towards the shared and shared prosperity of the region. It shall not be seen as a big brother who is imposing its will on the smaller countries. So if any disturbance in the Nepal, automatically that will show the impact on the India. Now coming to poverty and death row, it is related to the National Law University's the Death Penalty Research Project. So in this context, whatever we knew already, these got consolidated. Most of the people who are awarded the death penalty, they belong to the backward classes, and handful of them are from minorities. And most of these people are dropouts from the school, and they are from the economically vulnerable sections, and they do not have the crime history. So in this context, most of these people are also in young productive age. So in this context, it appears that there is an institutional prejudice against the poor and also the vulnerable in this country with regard to the capital punishment is concerned. So it is the time we have to revisit the capital punishment because there is a margin of error which cannot be corrected. So that is the reason why the capital punishment need to be abandoned from this country. Now coming to the water conservation. Now, in India, most of the budgets are being spent on the major irrigation. So the budgets are to the tune of 1 lakh plus crores are spent in Maharashtra in the last decade on creating the major irrigation potential. But however, it did not bring in the solutions to the existing drought. So the major reason here is the corruption. So even interlinking of rivers, a grand project which is proposed, is expected to go through the same line. So more than these grand projects, what shows the result are the practical solutions. So these practical solutions are there in our Indian traditional system. If you go to Rajasthan, Gujarat, in these places, you have this Bavari system or stepwell system. So here the water conservation systems, and also the community is created around a step well. So the social meetings used to happen around the step wells. So like these, again, the drip and splinter irrigation, all these can provide for the solutions to the water conservations. The practical ground level communitarian approach is necessary for water conservation. Now, drop by careful drop in Indian Express. If you see over here, the India is considered as a water-stressed country. What is a water-stressed country? If per capita availability of the water is less than 1700 cubic feet, you call water-stressed. But many of the regions in India are water-scarce countries. If per capita availability is less than 1000 cubic feet of the water, then it is a water-scarce country. So in this case, how we shall overcome this situation? So the irrigation potential created and irrigation potential utilized. If you see this gap, it is very high in many of the states. If you take Madhya Pradesh and Gujarat, they tried to narrow this particular gap. On the other hand, if you see the Madhya Pradesh, or if you see the Maharashtra and Andhra Pradesh models, they have spent lakhs of crores of the rupees on creation of the new irrigation potential, and there are too many charges of the corruption on this. So filling this gap has to be the first priority. And there is over exploitation of the groundwater. The major reason for this is the free power which is given to the farmers. So the rationalization of this free power is very much critical, and also water harvesting and recharging of the groundwater shall be given the due priority. And the next one is the rice and sugarcane are cultivated through flooding process. So we have to change to the new methods. For example, in the cultivation of the rice, a system of rice intensification where the less water is used, and various kinds of irrigation such as drip or splinter irrigation for the where the crops such as sugarcane, etc. need to be encouraged. So here, if you want to do this, the management has to be more on the demand side. What is this? Now, the power or else the water per hectare base, it has to be allocated. So we have to rationalize the use of the water by allocating the water on per hectare basis. If any farmer wants to use the water beyond the allocated levels, then it has to be charged to him. So water has to be charged. And the second thing is, if you observe the export of the grains, for 1 kg of the rice, if it is exported, around 3000 to 5000 liters of water is exported along with it, because in India to cultivate the rice we are using 3000 to 5000 liters of water. Similar is the case with the sugarcane. 1 kg of sugar is equivalent to 1000 liters of water. So increasing the water efficiency and removing the protections which these crops have for making them export competitive, it makes the farmers to shift towards the more efficient water use techniques. Now coming to the Prime Minister's focus Africa. So the Prime Minister Modi is going to give a due emphasis or going to make an African visit in the coming month. So the first stop is going to be at Mozambique. Why the Mozambique is chosen as? So Mozambique, it is becoming a gateway for the India's Africa-bound investment. And they are in constant touch from the India-Africa summit with regard to the energy. And it also has huge energy reserves. If it can change its legal parameters to allow for the international companies, then automatically it can become the second largest producer of the energy in Africa after the Nigeria. And India, or else when the new government has come into office, the Mozambique is the first country that has given or else that has provided a visit to the India. So the Mozambique president, Mr. Felipe Nyusi, has visited India in 2015. So that's the reason why Prime Minister chose Mozambique. Now, With regard to the city Dunhuang in China, there is a Silk Road International Cultural Expo is going to be held. So the Dunhuang as a city is on the path of the Silk Road, and the ancient caves, these are Mogao caves, are being restored. So with regard to this, many of the sculptures which are existing over there are Buddhist, and many of them are this particular technique of sculpture has imported from India. So India is going to play a significant role. It is also going to strengthen the India-China cultural relations. On the other hand, you can also see the another dimension to this. The China is criticized that it is trying to use its economic might to control or to grow as a global power. So China wants to show its soft power tactics. That's why the communist China is trying to use these cultural festivals to gain its soft power. That is what is the other side of the story. Now coming to the rationalizing or right sizing of the Indian army. Here we need to understand tooth to tail ratio. So it is the ratio between the number of battlefield fighters and the supportive systems which they have. It means that this is what is the battlefield fighters. So there has to be a logistic supply chain, and also there have to be a signaling system. Everything, all this together, the ratio between these, we call it as tooth to tail ratio. But however, this size is very big in India. Now these supportive systems can be automatized, and the logistical chain can be managed through use of the information systems. Communications can be streamlined. So if the tooth and tail ratio can be shortened if these logistic systems are automatized. For that, a high level committee was appointed by the army chief, Mr. Dalbir Singh. Now coming to the Indian Express. Now recently Geospatial Information Bill, the idea was mooted by the government. There is a criticism all the way. Now what are the provisions of this bill? If anyone depicts, disseminates, publishes or distributes an Indian map wrongly, then they can face an imprisonment of 7 years and a fine up to from 1 crore to 100 crores of rupees. That is the first thing. And the second thing is, this particular bill clearly states that the Google or else anyone who wants to use this for the geospatial information of India, they have to take the permission of the authority which will be established by the government. Now, it is going to discourage, it means the simple thing like this. In the UPSC exam, you are trying to draw an India map. You make a rough map of India. Then under this bill, then you can be punished for that, because you are depicting the India map as wrong. So that is too vague and too much of broader contours exist. And added to that, there are boundaries where there are many controversies with regard to India. If you talk about Aksai Chin area, the Google shows it as China administered Kashmir, and then if you talk about our Kashmir in international maps, Google shows it as India administered Kashmir, and then Pak administered Kashmir. In this way, it tries to show that. So in this case, how these issues the government wants to control are not clear. And coming to this, the tobacco packages. You know that cigarette and other tobacco products, Packaging and Labeling Amendment Rules 2014, they want to implement depicting a cigarette or else this particular harmful effects of the cigarette and the pictorial warnings on 85% of the package. So the minister, was transferred later. So Mr. Harshavardhan, then the health minister, he said this will be implemented from April 1st, 2015. Then the parliamentary standing committee has opposed to this on the ground that it will affect the livelihoods of the tobacco and tobacco farmers and BD makers. So in this context, what the government says is, the tobacco cultivators, they were given the alternatives, and the mapping of the crops were done and alternative crops were suggested to them. Now, from April 1st, 2016 onwards, these pictorial warnings, which are 85% of the size of the package, are being implemented. So let's recap the today's news. Poverty and death row. It is about the abandoning of the capital punishment in India, and most of the people who are succumbing to the capital punishment are from the marginalized sections, and most of them are poor and first-time offenders. Bangladesh battling for future. So the killing of the liberals, etc. on this strict action from the government is expected. And with regard to the Kathmandu turmoil, the Woli government systemic failures are visible, though the Prachanda's change in stand has protected the government today. But however, the existence of the government and the life of this government will be shortened very soon because of its failures. And coming to the conserving the last drop, we have to provide for the water conservation techniques, especially counting the every drop in use. As India is a water-stressed country, India has to rationalize the water for various agricultural activities, charging the water given for the agriculture, incentivizing the farmers for use of the less water, and providing for water accounting in the export of our agricultural products. Everything can help. And coming to Africa outreach, the Mozambique will be the first destination for the Prime Minister to visit because it is becoming the gateway for the Indian investments into Africa. And if it liberalizes its policy to make the foreign companies to enter into that country, it has the huge reserves of the energy. Coming to right sizing of army, the tooth to tail ratio has to be shortened. And the next is, with regard to the media, the freedom of press is very much important. In this crisis of information is described by the ethical journalism. Or what does this information crisis mean? Increasing the governmental surveillance and interference, the corporate snooping, exploitation of the personal information, growing trend of abuse in online speech, especially increasing gender stereotyping, and use of the online media for the spread of hatred, and propaganda and hate speeches being construed as journalism. All these are the challenges to the ethical journalism, and this has been described as the information crisis. Coming to the pictorial warnings, 85% of the packaged cigarettes have to show the pictorial warnings, and it is being implemented from April 1st, 2016. So drop by careful drop, already we discussed this particular thing. So now, coming to the freedom of speech and RTI are critical for advancement of media, we do agree. At the same time, growth of censorship, misuse of freedoms online are a threat to ethical journalism. So in this case, what is information crisis? How this information crisis is growing? So with the examples from India, Bangladesh, Pakistan, Press Freedom Index, what it talks about South Asia. And the third thing is, freedom of press, why is it important? And next is, the whistleblower protection. And added to that, the freedom of speech and expression, RTI and their role. All these things, if you write the answer, will be complete. Thank you very much. All the best.